Hi everybody, Bill here from turboDial with an in-depth video on how to set up hot lead calls in your Infusionsoft account. So the goal of hot lead calls is to improve the speed of follow-up whenever a new lead appears by initiating an immediate phone call from your designated agent to that new lead. So the idea being, call them as soon as they become a lead. That's the most likely chance of catching them at a time when they're interested. So there's two different hot leads setups that you might be going through. Hot lead alerts, which is where you notify multiple of your users immediately right in their turboDial panel, and then hot lead calls, which is where you immediately call a new lead even when you are away from your office, and that's this presentation. Okay, let's go through the setup. There's about 6 decisions you want to make before you start the setup. Let's go through them. First of all, which phone should be called when this hot lead call is initiated? Do you want it to be your cell phone? That's usually the best choice because you want to be able to take these calls wherever you are at, and you may not always be at the office. And then secondly, which turboDial caller ID do you want to see on the phone when that call comes into you? And you don't want to use the same phone number for number 1 and number 2 because some cell phone carriers will treat that situation in a special way and engage your voicemail if they see a call coming to you from your phone number. So don't use the same numbers for that purpose. Third, which turboDial caller ID do you want your prospect to see? This is the caller ID that will show on their phone when they're seeing your call come in. Both of these caller IDs for step 2 and step 3 must be validated caller IDs in your turboDial account. Fourth, which Infusionsoft user should be assigned the call note when that call note is left on the contact record. Fifth, do you want the calls recorded? Sixth, do you want to save a call outcome after the call? And if you are using the call outcome feature extensively in your turboDial account, then you probably do want to do that. Once you've got those decisions, you're ready to go ahead and create an HTTP post in an Infusionsoft campaign. And as a last step, we'll show you how to limit those hot lead calls to happen only during business hours, which is quite possible that's something you'll want to do. So, highly recommended, use your turboDial backend management account here, which is at this location, customerhub.net. If you've forgotten your login to that location, go to turbodial.biz/support and you can enter your email address there to retrieve it. It'll send you an email with all your details. From that account, you'll be able to do an easy copy and paste from the template that's provided there right into your HTTP post. So now let's walk through it. I'm in my turboDial account, and I'm going to go to turboDial upgrades and hot leads. Now, in this section, I can scroll down to past the hot leads alerts, past the text message alerts, hot lead calls. This explains what this hot lead call is about, and I'm going to click here for the instructions on how to set up a hot lead call. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create an HTTP post in a campaign sequence in Infusionsoft. And then we're going to populate that post using the data that is laid out here in this template. So let's start that. Here I am in Infusionsoft. I've got a campaign goal that starts a sequence. The first step is to assign an owner to the contact that we've just created. And then the second step is to initiate a hot lead call to that person. So let's go into that sequence and start building that hot lead call. So the first thing I need to do is I need to get an HTTP post. I'm going to call it initiate hot lead call. Now, to build out the internals of this post, you can see I've got already set up a post URL field and my first name value pair, which is contact ID, and a merge field for contact ID. I come back here, I can see that I've got a post URL, the contact ID, and then several more name value pairs. And let's just go through these and set them up one by one. First of all, I know that I'm going to need a few more name value pairs. In this case, let's count out some of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I'm going to add 9 more name value pairs to have those ready. And I'm just going to start populating the names by copy, get the key, and paste. Get the message. The copy and paste is important because it keeps me from making the mistake of entering a typo. Lead caller ID, agent phone, and we'll go through each of these as we populate them. Agent caller ID, user ID, record, and country. Let's go back to the top and work down the list. The key is the turboDial encrypted key token that is assigned to your turboDial account. It's the same key that was used to set up your browser extension. It's already been populated here in this template in your turboDial backend account, so just copy and paste it right in. The message is going to be the announcement that turboDial makes to your agent when they answer the first step of a hot lead call. Here's where you're going to want to explain what this call is about, because you may have multiple different hot lead calls set up in your Infusionsoft campaigns. You want to differentiate them in the message so that when the agent answers the phone, they'll know which type of hot lead this is. I'm just going to use a simple example right now, which simply says, please call, merges in the first name with the merge field now. So paste that here. Now you can use, as you build the message here, notice I've used the contact's first name as a merge field, but you can access other merge fields if you want to use their last name or something else that's on their contact record. You can merge it here into the message that will be read to your agent when they answer the first step of the hot lead call. Now, the next step is lead phone. Almost always you will use a merge field here, namely phone 1 from the contact record. Okay, we've chosen that we're going to call the contact's phone from the contact record when we make this hot lead call. Now we've got to decide what caller ID we're going to show to this lead when we make the hot lead call. This is going to have to be a caller ID we've already configured in turboDial, and I think we want to show this caller ID when we make this call to the contact. That's likely going to be our corporate number that we want the contact to recognize us by. So I have to hit the plus and then paste, because whenever I set a caller ID in turboDial, it populates it here, so I can simply copy it here and paste it here. The agent phone. Which agent, or it could be myself, but which agent do I want called at the beginning of this turboDial call when the hot lead first occurs? Here I can choose to merge it in using owner phone 1, and this will pull the phone number off of the user record in Infusionsoft, or you could choose any other phone number that you have. It doesn't have to be a phone number from Infusionsoft or from turboDial. And that's the phone that's going to be called when the hot lead call begins. It's the place where your agent can be reached. It could be their desk phone, it could be their mobile phone, it could be any other phone that you have. This is where the hot lead call begins. Now you want to choose the caller ID that you're going to display to your agent when they see that hot lead call coming into their phone. Here you should pick a caller ID that they'll recognize means this is a hot lead call. And in fact, you probably want to train them to install that caller ID as a phone in their smartphone's contact list and give it the name hot lead, so that when that call arrives, they'll know that this is a hot lead call and they can treat it with right priority. So again, this needs to be a phone number that you fill in from turboDial. So we go to turboDial and we're going to choose another caller ID. Let's choose this one. And we're going to say to the agent, whenever this phone number shows up on your caller ID, that's a hot lead call. Okay? User ID, this is the Infusionsoft user record ID that will be used to assign ownership for the hot lead call notes that are left by turboDial when the call is made. As you know, turboDial leaves a call note on the contact record for every call that's made, and those notes have to be signed to a user. If you go to your users in Infusionsoft under the Admin Users tab, you'll have a list of users here, and you can see that they each have an ID. That's the number we're talking about that we want to put into this field. Now you can actually merge that in. If you go to your merge fields, you can see under owner fields additional, the ID exists right there, and so you can merge it in that way, and that way if the contact record owner is the right person to be assigning the call note record ownership to, then you can merge it in easily that way. The next field is record. Do I want this call recorded? I have a choice. I can answer yes, no, or ask. If I want my agent to decide whether the call is going to be recorded, then I use ask. And then turboDial will ask them at the beginning of the call, do you want to record this call or not? And they can give an answer, and then turboDial will proceed accordingly. If you can decide now that you always want the call recorded, then enter yes instead, and the agent won't be asked. The call will always be recorded. Or if you can decide now that you do not want that call recorded, then enter no. Again, the agent will not be asked, and the call will not be recorded. In our case, we're going to say ask and let the agent decide whether this call is going to be recorded. Now the last field is country. Why do I need to put a country field here for use by turboDial when this hot lead call happens? Well, if you're just used to making calls and doing business in North America, that probably seems strange to you, but recognize that turboDial and Twilio, the telephony carrier that turboDial uses, is a worldwide service with many users from around the world. And if you're doing business in countries other than North America, the phone numbers must be formatted to work in those countries. So in order for turboDial to know how to format those phone numbers, it needs to know what country you have here. If you don't have the country field in the billing section, billing address section of your contact records, if that field is not filled in, then this will merge in nothing, and turboDial will assume North America. So it'll still succeed if you're in North America. But if you're in other countries, or if you're calling contacts and leads in other countries, you really do need to have that country field in the billing address section of your contact records filled in so that turboDial will know how to format phone numbers. Okay, there were several steps there. They're all pretty easy. I hope you followed along. I just populated them using the template that's over here in your turboDial account. Now there's a whole next section that's optional. These are your call outcomes. If you want to use the call outcome features of turboDial as part of these hot lead calls, then you can using there's following fields. Notice there's a call outcome 0 through 9. That means there's up to 10. You can have between 0, you can include no call outcomes here, or you can have up to 10 of these, 0 through 9. If you have more than 10 call outcomes configured in your Infusionsoft account for use by turboDial, you'll only be able to choose up to 10 of them here. You won't be able to choose all of them. turboDial is going to offer these call outcomes to your agent at the end of a call. So if you want your agent to be able to choose a call outcome after a call completes, this is the place where you're going to make those choices. When turboDial offers call outcome choices to your agent, it's going to say press 0 for, and then read call outcome 0, press 1 for, press 2 for, and so on. And so that's why there are 10 possibilities here, because your phone keypad only has the options of 0 through 9. So we're going to set up some of these. If you go back to, in this case, this Infusionsoft account, it has some call outcomes set up in the task, appointment, note, context. The custom fields for call outcome have been created, and I'm going to choose some of these to be call outcomes that we're going to use for these hot lead calls. I'm just going to do a one by one copy and paste. I'm going to copy that, come back here. Now I need to create some more rows. Bought a widget. Not interested in widgets. Wants a callback. refer to friend, I need one more row. Offered a discount. Now, so if there's my call outcomes, I'm going to offer to the agent at the end of a call, and they can choose one of these call outcomes. And if an agent chooses one of these call outcomes, and that call outcome happens to correspond to automation and an API goal in your Infusionsoft account, it will be triggered, and it will proceed just like any other call outcome that you've set up in to work with turboDial. Now let's go back to our template because I want to pick up some of these names and populate the name side of these fields. Call outcome 2. So 0, 1, and 2, 3, and 4. Did I have to start at 0? No, I could have started at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or I could have started at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In this case, I started at 0. So now I've got the hot lead call name value pairs populated correctly, and one thing I'm missing, which is the post URL. So go back to the template, to the top, copy that, and put it in. Make sure I don't have a leading space in front of that H, and I don't. Okay, now I have a completed HTTP post. It's going to call the agent at this phone number off of the agent's user record when a hot lead call begins. It's going to show that agent this caller ID. Hopefully that agent will have that set up in his or her smartphone contact listing so that when that call comes in, it will say hot leads, and they'll know how to answer that call and treat it accordingly. When the agent answers the call, the agent's going to hear a message announced by turboDial. turboDial is going to read this message right here that you've configured to your agent, and then it's going to offer your agent the opportunity to make that call or to ignore the call. If the agent proceeds to make the call, turboDial is going to call this number, and it's going to show this caller ID to the person that it's calling. And when they answer, or when their answer machine answers, your agent will be connected and talking to them. If you said ask, then the other thing that your agent will be asked at the beginning before the call begins is, do they want to record the call? At the end of the call, after they've talked to the lead or after they've left a voice message, your agent will be given some options by turboDial to enter a digit to choose a call outcome. And once they've done that, then the call is completed. And then turboDial will leave a call note record on the contact record and assign the ownership of that call note to whoever's user ID is entered there. That's the whole HTTP post. I'm going to mark it as ready and go back, and we can mark this sequence as ready and go back, and now I'm ready to publish this and have a working hot lead call in my campaign. Now, it's important to think about, where do you put these hot lead calls in your campaigns? You do not want to trigger hot lead calls en masse. That means you should avoid putting a hot lead call HTTP post into a campaign that can be triggered for many contacts at the same time. For example, a campaign where you might manually apply a tag to many contacts to begin that campaign all at once. That could trigger many hot lead calls to happen all at the same time, and of course you can only take one at a time, so you'll lose most of them. You want to install this hot lead call to be triggered when contacts take high-value individual actions. For example, if they placed an order or if they've submitted a contact form. So be careful about where you put your hot lead call in Infusionsoft. Now, there's one more thing I want to show you. If we go back to this Infusionsoft campaign, there's another sequence here set up that's for the purposes of hot lead calls. And again, it starts with a form, but then this hot lead call sequence is a hot lead call with a timer. And here's the hot lead call HTTP post right there. I'm not going to go inside of it this time because we've already walked through how to set that up. But notice that in front of it is a timer that says run on a weekday between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. Now, why are we doing that? we want to restrict hot lead calls to only occur during business hours. So when this sequence begins, both of these swim lanes will begin running. This timer says stop until we've reached a point between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. So if the sequence begins at noon, this timer is going to immediately pass through and let the hot lead call start. If, however, it's at 7 o'clock at night, this timer is going to stop and say it's not business hours, so we're going to halt and wait until it is business hours. Now, however, the second swim lane is also running, and the timer in that swim lane says, let's wait 15 minutes, and it doesn't matter whether it's a weekday or a business day or it's business hours or out of hours, we're only going to wait 15 minutes, and they're going to apply a tag. This tag says bypass the call. So what that means is if this timer has stopped us because we're no longer in business hours and it's waiting until business hours come back around, after just a few minutes, this timer is going to proceed and apply this tag. And what happens when that tag gets applied? Well, let's go look. When that tag gets applied, this goal is going to be completed because it says right here, bypass out of hours hot lead call. That's the tag that was applied. What that does is it cancels this whole sequence. So while we were waiting here for business hours to arrive, this timer proceeded and applied this tag, which canceled the whole sequence. And what that means is that the hot lead call will never happen. So hot lead calls need to occur when the lead is hot. If the lead fills out their form out of hours and your agent doesn't take calls out of hours, you can set your campaign up this way to not initiate a hot lead call. And it doesn't make sense to call it the next day because the lead's no longer hot. You can use some other calling list to call the lead on the next day. At the end of this, we've just got one more sequence that simply removes those tags so that they can be used again on the contact record. So that's how to restrict your hot lead calls to operate only during business hours. Okay, we've just gone through the setup of the hot lead call. We made these decisions. We decided which phone should be called when the hot lead call begins, either my phone or my agent's phone. And normally it's going to be a mobile phone so that we can receive those calls no matter where we are, even if we're out of the office. We've decided which caller ID to show to me or my agent when that call begins so that we know when that call comes in. It's a hot lead call and we can treat it with priority. We decided which caller ID we want the prospect to see when the call goes into the prospect. Usually it's going to be your business line so that if they call you back, they'll call in on your business line. We've decided which Infusionsoft user we want to assign the call note to. And that's often going to be the owner of the contact record or perhaps someone that you've specifically designated with their ID number. We've decided if we want the call recorded, and we've decided if we want to offer the option of saving a call outcome after the call. And we've built that all into the HTTP post. We created that post, installed it in Infusionsoft, and we also showed you how to limit those hot lead calls to business hours. Okay, that's how you set up a hot lead call, everybody. Thanks for listening. Happy hot lead calling.